Good morning, good day, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Mindful Drawing. I'm glad you could join us today. We're still working out our summer schedule. It looks like we're able to do the Zoom live meeting and hopefully work that into a broader audience with the YouTube streaming coming up soon. But let's not worry about these technological concerns and go ahead and take this moment to connect with our bodies, connect with our minds, and enter into a day or a space of relaxation to the act of creating in this medium of drawing. Today's exercise starts with something oddly familiar and something very challenging I find in drawing is the forming and representation of a face. But rather than start with an intention of a face that we might recognize, we'll just begin with a few shapes and allow those shapes to form the basic building blocks that we're familiar with, and then expand out from those depending on what we discover in our act of marking, and fill the page and transition from what we might recognize as the shapes of a face into a new territory that we can just allow our mind to be absorbed and wander, and then to expand and free into the space of relaxation. So come along and join me for the journey, and let's draw together. For people who are new, I gotta talk and draw at the same time to go through a few things. Sketchbook, notebook, any pen or pencil that you're interested in drawing with is fine. We'll do kind of a quick warm-up just to get the hands and the eyes and everything a bit connected, and then a little bit longer form exercise that is just kind of exploring the space of the page with lines and shapes, and usually ends with a little bit of free drawing for 5 minutes or so once something develops there. So today, for the warm-up, grabbing a little bit of a marker, let things flow kind of easy. Being on a different day, my whole general schedule seems shifted. I'm coming from a workout instead of yoga. It feels very different. My whole body's in a different place right now. So I think something to maybe be a little loose at the page would be nice. I'm just going to start by drawing some squiggly shapes, so that my arm and hand begin moving around. Maybe I don't even close the shapes and just let them keep going. And I find that getting rushed in, getting ready, getting set up, the energy from that, and I can use this moment of just drawing some squiggles and curves, shapes along the page to bring my attention back in to where I'm at and what I'm doing, and focus us on just creating a mark by engaging the pen with the paper. Here, I begin to slow my movements down, slow the movement, and bring attention to how whatever instrument you're using, pen, pencil, marker, charcoal, is making contact with that paper. Let the changes in speed and direction and pressure that you're applying change how you interact with that texture. Here, this marker has a lot of friction when I go slow. It's made to go fast and wants to flow along the paper. And as I become aware of how my instrument prefers to move or has a connection to that paper, I begin to adjust and just try to find a nice even ground of flow that lets me change direction smoothly, lets me wind in and out with ease. Get that arm and fingers and hands both connected with a solid grip, but light and loose enough to allow some freedom of movement. To prepare myself to let the eyes and hands just wander and guide around the page as we move from this warm-up into a longer form exercise. Making a few final marks. If it helps, I always like to switch to my other hand for just a little bit, just to turn on that other side of the brain, feel a little bit of discomfort in the hand that's not my primary hand. get everything a little woken up. I think I'll stick with this marker because I'm enjoying how it works, but feel free to change it up or use anything you like. Maybe stretch and flex the fingers a little bit here just to get ready. Prepare the posture. And this morning I was thinking of maybe what will we draw. And I didn't really stick to somewhat abstract and repetitive things because they're easy to kind of disappear into the attention to the mark. And I was thinking about drawing faces as well. And rather than trying to represent or replicate any face, I just thought I would start with a rather large shape that might be kind of face-like and begin to fill that first with features we recognize, but without a model. So just knowing that there are some ovoid areas somewhere within the face that start to fill the larger shape with similar smaller shapes, and identifying similar possible ovoid shapes and locations that we can bring into our mind of the face. I'm just going to start to make something that probably looks really weird and doesn't start to really have the effects of faceness, and this is an opportunity to begin to diverge a little. Just make shapes in the same pattern that might fill the space and begin where features occur and expand themselves outwards. So as I mark the space of the cheekbones, and just these repeating ovoid shapes, I'm beginning to have a greater pattern emerge, and I can begin to allow the act of drawing, this act of the forming of an oval or a circle or an ellipse, to just begin to fill the space without concern for the specific shapes of a face anymore. Use that memory of something as a starting point to develop a technique or a pattern, and then allow that pattern to begin to fill the space we've established on the page. Here in my large ovoid. I'm going to gather the circles, trying to bring my attention to how I'm drawing them now that I've established a few, finding this rhythm for myself that is kind of a double wrapping of each one, going around and coming back to the beginning twice, letting a little bit of wobble to our repetition soften the edges, then kind of thicken and thin to gain visual difference on the page. I'm really connecting my eye to this act of forming these shapes and allowing that connection to just fill the space between things. Not worrying how it connects back, not forcing it into the image of the face, letting it extend out from there. It's something new, and that each time we engage with the paper, it's a new act of filling just that space and being in just that moment with the action of the pencil or the pen and the rhythm of how you move your hand and your arm. And as we get more attuned with that rhythm, we can begin to connect it also to our breath. Maybe we breathe out on one shape and then breathe in on the next. Trying to find that connection I find my out breaths a bit longer than my in breaths, so perhaps I breathe in on one revolution and out on a double. And letting that variation in our body's rhythms create its own engagement with the paper. Breathing in on one drawing of shape, out on a double. And jumping around the page a little bit just to find new voids to breathe into and breathe new life into the gathering of circles and ovoids. Really bringing my attention to a consistency of how I'm breathing and forming shapes. In on the one and out for a double. And does this rhythm of the breath maintain as size changes, as you might shift to fill smaller voids, zooming in to areas that are being compressed by larger breaths. And as areas begin to fill, finding a new pace and a new place to gather, I'm going to shift to trying to doing some larger shapes, one on the in-breath and a double on the out-breath. Letting them expand and contract to the boundaries that exist from each previous action. And finding room for them to expand into larger territories on the same rhythm of in and a double out. Similar to counting breaths, you might have an in for a 3 count and an out for a 6. I find mine tend to fall into a 2-to-1 range while walking meditation. I'm not worrying about controlling the breath as much as observing our different rhythms. Yours might be 1-to-1 or 3-to-5. Finding what pace works for this position you're sitting in and the way that you're engaging the paper with the pencil. You're breathing in and drawing on the in stroke. Breathing out and drawing on the out stroke. And finding the oscillations in those rhythms, the difference, having an impact on your engagement with the paper. And as we sink into connecting with our breath and our motion, I find that it's nice then to begin to let it become automatic as our attention has calmed and entered the space of the drawing, to let the breath flow in and out, and just keep the rhythms going. Whatever you've established and whatever they might shift into as we explore this page through the repetition of this technique. That's one thing I enjoy every week, is really absorbed into the paper and the act of drawing, that we're in a dynamic environment, a space with maybe windows or pets or a breeze, maybe outside. And as our attention is both absorbed and then released through this repetitive act, we can allow those other elements of the environment just to wash over our condition, to feel perhaps some fresh air flow in through our nostrils as we breathe in, or to feel the warmth of the sun as it may come across our page or face or our back, and let those events unfold while we engage our mind and our hand and eyes together with this external interface to visual expression and connection. The eyes are given so much priority and processing within the brain that if we can bring our attention to them and activate their cognitive functions through something like drawing, they light up pathways in our mind, sometimes activating memories or feelings or just states of being that we can sink ourselves into or allow to flow out through this medium that is our expression here of drawing. To have some space to recognize how persistently the visual processing wants to make connections and fit the world into its patterns, and allowing ourselves to flow in and out of this space that we may have created with a few marks that loosely represented something of a face and have now drawn together, potentially becoming something utterly different or still maintaining a bit of that characteristic. You begin to have run out of or filled the space of the page. Perhaps you can look inwards to previous shapes, scaling up or down in the abstract sense that scale is always free, and the same motion and action can take place at any size. We can loop recursively with our breath into our marks and just sink further and further into this moment and this act of drawing onto a page. And there's always a point in these drawings that I find the density of mark onto the page is beginning to pull my eye away from just the act of making a shape and into a mode that it wants to have intention to those marks. It begins to want to guide with purpose some larger composition. And that is a moment, I think, to face in these exercises that are about opening and freeing and connecting and use it as an exercise to bring back attention just to the mark for a little while, knowing that these patterns we see, these new images or territories that we might have generated, will be there for us to explore at any time. You can always pull out a pen or a pencil and begin drawing some shapes and see where they go, whether it's for a practice of mindfulness and awareness or a practice of creative expression. The exercise builds both into our way of thinking. We need to spend a little time quietly drawing and exercising that attention to just the current mark, quickly jumping to any new free space and focusing on the act of making that mark through our breath and motion of our hand and fingers. Trusting the simple repetition that we've established. And in other meditation practices, after we've put in the work to find the void in our attention by bringing focus and releasing it simultaneously, we can do that here in the act of drawing as we maybe metaphorically, maybe literally begin to wiggle our toes and wiggle our fingers. We like to do that through the same medium and just now surrender to that urge to further add composition, visual connection from what I've seen, perhaps to make emphasis and highlights by adding tone or shade or filling in some of these shapes that we've made, and just exploring the space we've created for a couple of minutes as a way to bring us back to be ready to engage with the rest of our day, be both aware and attentive, but also able to look externally, to look at the larger picture. Now that we know we can always bring our attention and focus back with our breath and with a little guided practice and repetition if we need to realign and reestablish to face challenges or stressors that come up during our day, or to just start a creative act without the overhead of worrying what I am going to make, but letting and trusting my creative eye and my hand to begin to make something. And use this time to just draw and have a little fun. Maybe we can come back and try to reestablish the face in some way. Maybe it's gone far too long along this track of losing it into the space of breathing. It's vanished into the background. And I like to know that even starting with a bit of an intention or picture in mind, it's good to be open to the possibility that things might change and adapt, be influenced by both our internal forces and our external influences. And then we can make a choice to realign or travel down the new path. And to savor a bit of that feeling in the act of drawing as we come to the end, and allow all our other senses to be activated and come back to where we can engage with the broader world around us. let the creation here live in its moment or few moments that we're able to share together in an act of drawing, and always have that opportunity to take it further along if it's something that interests you, or try the practice again for a few minutes just to bring back that sense of calm and attention. Thank you all so much for coming along for this journey. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you do, go ahead and like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Hopefully we get more people here, we begin to expand it. I'll share a link to the website at Mindful Pratt, where they host these drop-in sessions. There are several others, and I encourage you to check them out. Hopefully some fit into your schedule, and we can all connect together through our breathing, through our drawing, through our making, as a collection of creative people, or just those interested in exploring the world through creative expression. Have a wonderful week, and thank you for joining. Be well.